everybody. Welcome. Thank you all for coming. We're going to get started in 1 minute. And in case you haven't already figured out, we have 3 groups that are going on. We have housing here to the left, and then we have education on the far left, and good governance. And it looks like there's a lot of people in good governance, and you all are very caring people.
Are we supposed to self-sort now, or are you doing it?
It would be good if you could self-sort, so if you want to sit with housing or education, you should move. We're going to start with an introduction, so there'll be time to kind of move around if you need to. And then we're going to have a short presentation, and then we're going to have some lunch and some discussions. So there'll be a lot of time to get up and walk around. Sorry for the heat. I think the air conditioning may not be working, but it's not too terribly hot outside. And the staff has done a wonderful job setting up things, so we're all in good shape.
Yes.
Yes. All right, we're going to go ahead and get started since we're sort of running behind time. I want to say that Dr. Lois Rosado could not make it today because she's terribly ill at the moment. She's very disappointed about not being here, so she's done a lot of work working with the commission to get this day going, and we have everything in order, except for a few minor technical issues, which are now resolved. And so I'm going to turn it over to James, and he is going to do the introduction.
Great. Thank you so much. And we're grateful for you to come out today on a Saturday when it was raining and it's hot here. And we're just really grateful for you all to be part of the Greenbelt community today. And welcome, everyone. I'm James Williams, Jr. I'm a member of the Greenbelt Reparations Commission. And again, as Dr. Natson said, Dr. Rosado couldn't make it. And I'll read her remarks. She said, I reluctantly serve as chair to the Greenbelt Reparations Commission. And she wanted to welcome you all to the 3rd town hall meeting of the Greenbelt Reparations Commission. Now, last November, we shared some of the research on past harms that we have uncovered in our work and findings that show how those harms persist today for the African American community. And at that town hall and subsequent public meetings that we've gathered some ideas for potential remedies and to make amends for those harms. And today, we are going to share the context for the Greenbelt reparations and discuss some proposed remedies. First of all, I would like for all of my fellow commissioners to stand and be recognized. If you're able to stand. Thank you so much for all of your participation. We're all getting paid the same amount of volunteer money that we have, and so I want to thank you. And I want to give credit again to Dr. Rosado, Dr. Natson, and Gail Critchlow for their leadership in the years that we've been here. It's almost going to be 3 years. 16 of the 21 original members are still here. The fact that we're still here after those years, that's got to say something for her leadership and also for our individual persistent and want to make the Greenbelt a better place. I would also like to acknowledge the city council members, some of whom are my neighbors, city council members who are here. Well, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Represent Greenbelt Station. All right. Mayor Jordan was unable to come here due to a conflict, but he has a video that he's wanted us to share. And I also want to thank Megan Young. Where is Megan? She is here. Megan Young, thank you. Thank you so much, Megan. She served as the city's liaison to the commission for over 3 years, and her historical knowledge and support for our work has been invaluable. And through her assistance, these town halls have been possible. And also Gail Critchlow. Gail is here, and also Mark Wilson for coordinating, guiding, and organizing this town hall. And before I bring my colleague, Dr. Natson, up, I just wanted to say something else. And then before we begin, I just wanted to say something that I think is very, very important. And that is, this presentation isn't about assigning blame to anybody in this room. None of us created this history we're about to discuss, but we all inherited it. And then together we have an opportunity, and I would argue a responsibility, to decide what we do with that history. And with that, I just wanted to bring up my colleague, Dr. Natson.
I think we're going to do a video from our beloved mayor. Is he beloved? Yes, he is. Yes. Well, that's not it. There it is.
There it is.
Good afternoon. On behalf of the Greenbelt City Council, welcome to the Greenbelt Reparations Commission Town Hall. Thank you for being here today for a deeply important historic conversation about truth, reconciliation, and structural repair for our community. I'm at a planning retreat for the Metropolitan Washington Council of Governments this afternoon, and I'm unable to attend in person. But your presence here today, whether you're in the room or watching from home, signifies your shared commitment to the future of Greenbelt. This milestone would not be possible without a huge collective effort, and I want to thank the stakeholders whose work and dedication has brought us to this point in time. First and foremost, I want to thank our 21-member Reparations Commission led by Dr. Lois Rosado and Denise Nasruddin for their volunteer work, all of their volunteer work collectively since February of 2023. Also, I want to acknowledge the African American Redress Network, the University of Maryland, the Thurgood Marshall School of Law Movement Lawyering Clinic at Howard University, and the Tribesi Consulting Group. But finally, I want to express our deep gratitude to the African American residents, elders, neighbors, as well as the Native Americans who have shared their testimonials, lived experience, and visions for a repaired Greenbelt. This journey began back in November of 2021 when Greenbelt voters passed a referendum to review and recommend reparations for our African American and Native American residents. Since that time, over the past 3 years, the Commission has analyzed demographic data, convened numerous public meetings, conducted 153 community surveys, and captured over 30 qualitative interviews. So reparations, it's not merely about looking backwards at historical exclusion. Reparations, it's about actively designing a just and equitable path forward. So today is about presentation, but more importantly, it's about listening. The draft recommendations you're going to hear today are a starting point, but your feedback this afternoon will directly shape the final report and formal remedies submitted to the City Council. So once again, on behalf of the Greenbelt City Council, thank you to the Reparations Commission for this important work.
All right, I'm going to turn it over to Mark to tell us about today.
All right, thank you. As James thanked the commission members, I also want to thank all the spouses and children of the commission members who make space for all the number of hours that we have to do work. So I just want to go over a few norms for this space. We want to engage in a deep dialogue, and it's always helpful to have some norms to land on to help us through difficult discussions, through that dialogue. You will have these norms. Each of your small group facilitators has these norms with them if you need to look at them. But the first is that we want to center that, we want to hear all voices in the space with a centering on those within the harmed communities. And what that means is we have to seek to understand. We're not trying to win a battle with ideas here. We're seeking to understand and seeking to hear the collective wisdom and feedback that people have. And so we want to embrace multiple perspectives, dialogue versus right-wrong debate kind of thinking. We want to be aware of the space. If we want to be aware of how much space we're taking up in the conversation, we want to hear from all voices, but that means a sharing of the space. Understand the value of discomfort. So some of these conversations, you might not agree with what the person's saying next to you, but we want to understand that there's value in that discomfort. That surfacing of that means we're getting multiple perspectives. We want to accept and embrace non-closure. Now, what does that mean? It Because we're not going to solve everything in the space today. We're not going to come up with necessarily all the right answers in the space. So we want to accept that that might be the case. Finally, we want to respect confidentiality, which means stories shared in your group stay in your group. If the lessons learned, the feedback learned from your group will share out. But if someone shares a story, a very meaningful personal story, you want to hold that sacred to your group. And finally, take care of your wellness. If you need to go to the bathroom, if you need to get a drink of water, you want to make sure you're taking care of your wellness first. And again, you'll have 2 or 3 facilitators in your small groups who will be able to guide that. And yeah, we are deeply grateful for attending a 3-hour session at the beginning of summer and for hearing all your feedback. So thank you all so much. And I'll turn it back over to Denise.
Thank you, Mark. Okay, so we have 2 readers who are going to read for us. I think I'm going to have to ask you guys to come up front because we don't have a floating microphone. So first, Mark Miller.
So this is a quotation, a definition written by Robin DiAngelo, and it goes, "Prejudice is a prejudgment about a person based on the social group to which that person belongs. Discrimination is an action based on prejudice. Racism occurs when a racial group's prejudice is backed by legal authority and institutional control. This authority and control transform individual prejudices into a far-reaching system that no longer depends on the good intentions of individual actors. It becomes the default of society and is reproduced automatically."
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Mark. And next we have Bob Rand.
This is a definition that we came up with about 2 years ago.
My glasses.
I better put my glasses on. Reparations is a process of repairing and healing from the harms that have been inflicted on African Americans and American Indians by government laws, policies, and the practices of sectors that benefited from the injustices, such as banks, corporations, insurers, educational institutions, health systems, and religious groups.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
Okay, you're up.
Hello, thank you. So, our goals with regard to our commission, our commission is 5 responsibilities. First, we research our local history. Second, we engage residents. That's what we're doing today. Third, we examine how historic decisions continuing to affect equity and equality today. Fourth, we educate our community. Finally, we develop recommendations for our city council. Note that education comes before recommendations, and understanding must come before action. So, we have some questions with regard to the audience, but before we, tell Greenbelt's story, I'd like everyone to think about these 3 questions. What do you love about Greenbelt? How would you change? What would you describe, how would you describe race relations here? And, really, there are no right or wrong answers, but I hope you'll keep those questions in mind as, we continue. So Greenbelt was one of America's great New Deal experiments. It's one of 3 cities through the New Deal. It was designed as a model community. For example, Columbia, Maryland was designed as a model community. And what does a model community entail? Walkable neighborhoods, affordable housing, beautiful parks, excellent schools, strong civic engagement like we're doing now. Many of those goals and ideals remain strengths today. But there's another part of that story. Residency wasn't open to everyone. The same federal government that built this remarkable community, a community in which I've invested much of my money and my time, also determined who could and could not live here. So the historical context is perhaps the most important part of today's presentation. The Maryland economy was built on slavery. It's built on the enslavement of human beings. Prince George's County was built on enslavement of human beings and slavery. When Greenbelt opened in 1937, segregation was not an accident. It was policy. African Americans helped build Greenbelt, and they also worked here, and they maintained this community, but they were prohibited from living here. Think about that. Imagine coming here from Washington, D.C. or other places, building, working hard, sweating in the sun, being cold in the winter, and building homes for families while knowing your own family could never live here or purchase one. Housing has always been one of the primary ways American families build wealth. When families were excluded from home ownership, you weren't just denied from a house. You were denied generations of opportunity, academic achievement, and other things that we call the American dream. And that history still matters today. So I'd like everyone, after hearing this, to take a moment to reflect. Sometimes learning history is uncomfortable. My major was African history at Fisk University. That's okay. That's fine. That's no problem with that. Because growth often comes from discomfort. I like to say 40 pounds in an afro ago, I was running track in Prince George's County, Maryland. And the first thing I learned was when I went out there, the next day I knew I was going to hurt, and it was painful and all those sort of things. But eventually I ended up taking third place in the state in my event, but it took a lot of pain. It took a lot of sacrifice, and it took a lot of a fight. That was then, and this is now.
Thank you, James. Okay. All right, so as we move into the 21st century, we can see and experience that some of the vestiges of segregation and the Jim Crow era still continue on. We have, Greenbelt has grown tremendously. There are different sections of Greenbelt, and they have been kind of separated by physical highways. So there's this transportation issue where Center Greenbelt is a little bit different from Greenbelt East and Greenbelt West. And residents in those parts of Greenbelt have less access to activities that are happening in the center. The other thing that we noticed is as the population grew, more African Americans were moving into Greenbelt, but they were moving into Greenbelt East and Greenbelt West. In 2008, about 50% of the population was African American, and they were represented by a city council that was 100% white. So that was one of the injustices that continued even after desegregation. So we love data, and I wanted to thank Bob Rand because he did a lot of work in looking at census data and putting together some statistics for us to share with you today. So this is a graph that shows you the demographic changes in Greenbelt from 1980 to 2020. The red line is the white residents, and that's white alone, not Hispanic. And then the orange line is African American only, not including Hispanic. And so you can see over time, we actually have a greater percentage of African Americans living in Greenbelt proper compared to white residents. The other thing I want to point out is about 2000 is when the population was about equal African American and white residents. And then in 2020, you can see that it's changed dramatically. So I love charts, so I'll try to go through this for those of you who don't like charts. So we have Greenbelt West, Greenbelt Center, and Greenbelt East. Now this data comes from the Census Bureau, and some of the census tracts don't align perfectly, so these are general estimates. But you can see the bar on the left, that's the African American population. That's the blue bar, and the orange bar is the white population. So in Greenbelt West, there's more African Americans than there are white people. And then all the way to the right, you can see Greenbelt East. Again, significantly more African Americans than whites. And in the center, we have Greenbelt Center, and the, orange bar is not white, it's Hispanic. So the green bar is white residents, and in Greenbelt Center you can see that's the predominant race there. The numbers in the circles is the percentage of the total population that belongs to that area. So 39% of our population is in Greenbelt West, 34% is in Greenbelt East, and 27% is in Greenbelt Center. Okay. I'm just curious, how many of you are from Greenbelt West? Raise your hands. Okay, we've got 2 people raising their hands. Oh, sorry, we've got 3, 4 over there. I can count, really. How many of you are from Greenbelt East? Okay, so we've got about 3 people. So I'm guessing the rest of you are Greenbelt Center or someplace else. How many? Greenbelt Center, okay, yeah. So the majority are Greenbelt Center. Thank you all for coming. Okay. All right, the other data that I wanted to share, which I thought was very interesting, is the poverty rates. This was sort of interesting because it was kind of surprising. The poverty rates have been going down nationally over the last few decades, but in Maryland it's 10%, in Prince George's County it's 11%, in Greenbelt it's 19%. Those of you in Greenbelt Center might be surprised. I was surprised. But it's made up of different sections of Greenbelt. And in looking at the census data, there is at least one section where the poverty rate is 27%. The thing I didn't put here, because we can't confirm it exactly, is the child poverty rate, which is higher than 27% across the entire Greenbelt. In some sections of Greenbelt, the child poverty rate is over 40%. So that's something that we really need to keep in mind when we're talking about equity. Okay, so a lot of our work sort of gets summarized in wealth disparities. And as James has shared, the slavery plantation owners benefited a lot. The economy benefited a lot from this free labor. But there were other vestiges, like the criminal justice system, which goes back a very long time. If you haven't seen the PBS documentary, Crime and Punishment in America, it's really worth taking a look at because it really shows you how the racialized criminal justice system supported the white wealth in America. Also, I don't think this is a surprise to most of you, but white wealth is considerably larger than the wealth of African Americans. Even after desegregation, there were a number of experiences African Americans had that prevented them from becoming homeowners. There were barriers that were set up, redlining occurred. Now, much of that may be gone, but have we intentionally made changes in the systems that supported those barriers? And I think the last point here is worth noting, and that is historians and economists have traced present-day wealth gaps to the injustices of race-based chattel slavery and subsequent race-based discrimination. So this is where we are today. African Americans are less wealthy,
and most likely this is due to past discrimination and discriminatory systems that were set up. A lot of our African Americans, based on interviews that we have done, feel marginalized and feel excluded, not just from city services, but also from the government processes. And this is in our community. So there's a perception that there's fewer resources and fewer services going out to the communities that are predominantly African American. So there we are facing some real concerns about equity and services distributed across the different sections of Greenbelt. So these are questions. We keep throwing questions at you. I promise we're going to give you a chance to answer all of them. And if you don't get a chance to answer all your questions, Megan Young, who has really been a rock star, has published her email on our website, so you can send her all of your thoughts and comments. She's happy to receive them. But these are the questions we want you to start talking about before we go into breakout groups. I'm going to leave this up here. You can talk with your neighbors, but we invite you to go get lunch, come back to your seat, and just have a chat. But we're going to have a word from our sponsor right now.
No, I just wanted to thank a few other people who are involved in this. Thank you to the Greenbelt Library folks who helped get this room and everything set up. Thank you so much to Greenbelt Recreation, set up all the lunch, set up all the audio, set up all these things. And thank you to Gate TV, Greenbelt News Review, and any other media outlets here, because all of this wouldn't be able to take place without all those people putting it all together. So just wanted to thank everyone involved in that. So. Oh yes, and we do have lunch in the back, so we'll give folks about 15 minutes to kind of get your lunch, and then it would be very helpful if you're not already in the group that you want to be in, get your lunch and navigate your way back to the groups. We have housing here, we have general governance here, and we have education there in the back. So we'll be roving around. If you have any questions, Denise, James, I'll be roving around if you need any help.
Thank you. Enjoy your lunch.
All right, so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Denise, who's going to walk us through a video.
Well, I'm not walking. This is Dr. Nkechi Taifa's video. It's on YouTube if you're interested, but we've played it once before, so you may have seen it, but it's worth watching again. Thank you, Dr. Nkechi Taifa. Okay. So at this time, I would like to invite a speaker. So one of the things we have been doing, one of the things we have been doing as part of our reparations work is connecting with other reparations commissions across the country, and there are conferences and things where we can support one another. We have been very lucky that there is a commission in College Park, just down the street, and they have done tremendous work over the last few years. And I would like to now invite, Robert Thurston, who lives in Lakeland. He's the commissioner on the city's Restorative Justice Commission. He's also a board member on the Lakeland Community Heritage Project. And he's the current Civic Association president, and he's going to do a short presentation to tell us about their work.
Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for having me here. I am very grateful to have this opportunity. I would like to thank the Greenbelt Reparations Commission for having me here, especially Dr. Rosado, and I have to say I'm apologizing up front. I hope I'm not the reason for her being sick, but I can tell you that I probably made her sick over this last week trying to get me situated for this event. I stand here today on not only the shoulders of current residents of Lakeland, but also those that are past. I am a baby when it comes to talking about the Lakeland community, and I've been there for 40 years. However, kind of a little joke on myself, I was there about 6 months talking to a neighbor, and he's kind of pointing out the houses on my block, and at some point it hit me that I was the only one on my side of the street that wasn't somehow related. So that's kind of how Lakeland is and has been. What I'd like to do and have been asked to do is just to give a brief history of Lakeland and some recommendations. The Lakeland history, the harms caused by urban renewal, and key recommendations outlined in Restorative Justice Commission. I would also say that most of the things that have already been said today has been a part of the Lakeland Restorative Justice story up until this point. And I feel that we're on the right path, so I welcome you to that road as well. Lakeland was, or is, has been a very beloved community. The quote that most will say is that it was family, regardless of whether it was related or not. I recently, not too long ago, something that stays present of mind for me is one of the interviews was from a young lady, well, a senior, who acknowledged that she didn't even know racism exists until she left Lakeland. And that has to do with the wholesome that Lakeland was able to produce. The history of Lakeland began in the 1890s. Well, I will predate it there. We, as we know, are on the Piscataway Indian lands, and Lakeland was a part of that. However, Lakeland became known and in existence in the 1890s when a developer named Edward Newman had planned an all-white resort community using what was then the existing lake in Lakeland that was basically created by the, I don't know, I guess it was the B&O Railroad at that time, because they wanted to use some of the soil for the tracks. So that's where the lake came from. So his idea was to build this resort community for his fellow residents of the Washington, D.C. area as a place that they could go to as a resort community. He actually designed and outlined the community. However, because of some economic shortfalls in the country at the time and just some other things that was happening throughout, that did not materialize. Somewhere around the early 1900s to 1920, those white owners began to sell property to African Americans. And something that was set up here in the 30s when Greenbelt was being developed, that there were African Americans that worked but probably couldn't live here, and I'm going to guess some of them probably were residents of Lakeland at the time. In addition to that, there was the railroad, there was the airport, and also the university, all of which now have been realized that were places that the past Lakelanders have worked. One thing of note is that the picture was discovered at the College Park Airport Museum identifying the first crew of the airmail, and at the time the white members of the picture were identified, but there were several black people standing there that went nameless. And we have since discovered that they were also Lakelanders that were part of that. So Lakelanders have not only provided for its own community, but also the surrounding areas of College Park. So between 1920 and 1960s, churches flourished, civic clubs, Local businesses and community schools were also part of the Lakeland community. I believe up until 1950, most of the African Americans that were in northern Prince George's County attended the high school and middle school in Lakeland because that was the only opportunity for education during that period of time, as well as several residents working in University of Maryland. In the 60s is when the city decided to rely on the opportunity of urban renewal. The turning point came in 1963 when the city adopted urban renewal powers based on false claims that Lakeland was blighted. The decision set in motion the destroying of physical properties that even unto the day is missing. Of the 150 households, 140 homeowners were displaced. In 1920, as was mentioned with the Black Lives Matter that came about due to the tragic death of George Floyd, the city of College Park made a formal apology at the time of they made a proclamation on Black Lives Matter, and one of those shoulders that I definitely stand on, who is the maestro of this all, Miss Maxine Gross, challenged the council that if that was truly their intent, that they had a community in its own backyard that deserved some recognition and some need and repair. So from that, a resolution was established, and in 1922, the Restorative Justice Commission was created. Prior to that, there was a steering committee that led us into that process. Just wanted to highlight what the beloved community of Lakeland consisted of, and what were the themes of the Lakeland that made it what it was. Housing was affordable, most of which were built by the residents with their own hands, and multi-general families owning land and building wealth. There was a learning component. There was a Rosenwald Elementary School. The high school that I mentioned was also a Rosenwald school, and if you all know the history of Rosenwald, there was a contribution component that was required for the schools to be built, so that meant that the community had to come together and raise funds for those schools to exist. It was also a gathering place, and this is one of the things that I, as a Civic Association president, am challenged with every day, because I know that Lakelanders communicate, but their communication has drastically changed because there was always these meeting places, churches, people's homes, the beer garden, the halls that they had. So that was a key component to what made Lakeland beloved and thriving. I would also say that it's somewhat documented, but it was not a Chitlin Circuit designation, but there was definitely a lot of performers and actors that lived and played in Lakeland during that time. There's also some history of the Negro Leagues coming through and playing some of the local teams in Lakeland as well. So gathering was a natural. Nature, as I mentioned before, the lake was there from the inception of the railroad, so it was a place for nature. People could venture off into the woods. Fruits gardens were a natural thing, and it's often talked about the different types of vegetation that people would eat on their way to and from school or out of people's yards. The connectivity, partially because it was self-contained, but also with the trolley car running through Lakeland, There was a actual business district that existed on Rhode Island Avenue. As I mentioned, there was a beer garden, there was 2 local stores, and almost everything that need to be of existence for a person or a family could be found in Lakeland. As again, thriving community, the pictures here are just an example of houses that were built by the hands of Lakelanders. The middle picture is showing the 2 historical churches that have been in existence almost since the early days of Lakeland. And this is just an example of the generational families. I believe this is the Gray family, but you can see there's 2 to 3 generations here. And this would have been taken sometime around the 1920s or 30s. So the urban renewal documented harms of what happened is, as I mentioned before, household displacement, black ownership raised, years of community life taken away. Since the Lakeland founding was 120 years, and we've also discovered that many of the homes that were homeowners and families that were displaced, the compensation for that really netted down to 0. And the promise is that whatever the renewal would happen would allow Lakelanders to have first priority to return. So that was one of the major things, is that the promises did not go as anticipated. Again, just going through this systematic dismantling, and there was the mentioning of generational wealth. I mean, you can see that home ownership, loss of education, natural space, all kind of contributed to not only personal and physical loss, but also the mental trauma that still exists today. Lakeland before, urban renewal, and Lakeland after is still a transforming event. As I said, I've been in Lakeland for approximately 40 years. It was still predominantly homeowners that had family and lineage from the early days. I would say currently there's probably 30%, and I may be exaggerating, on the home ownership that is currently within Lakeland, and the number of families that have that lineage is dwindling very rapidly due to age. And part of that is, as I mentioned, that harm that goes along with that. If you can just imagine someone almost physically telling you you have to leave, and even if there is the opportunity to return, there's so much trauma that's associated with that's probably not something that is present of mind or consideration. Why it happened. Racism, the belief that black communities do not deserve what others wanted. Misrepresentation in Lakeland was falsely labeled as blighted. Disregard for Lakelanders' agency. Delays and inaction by the city. And one thing I want to point out is the houses were raised in about 1972. The first development that actually took place was probably about 10 years later. So there was a tremendous amount of loss, and in addition to physical attributes, but time as well. The big one was the broken promises that never materialized. The journey for repair right now started in 1929 with the acknowledgement, 2020 with the acknowledgement of the city with the resolution, the development of the commission in 2022, organizing in 2024, which included the Braxton Institute launching of reparations for Lakeland Now, we were able to have both Dr. Mindy Fullylove, who talks about root shock, which basically is the trauma that I'm speaking of, where you're physically displaced from an area that you love, grew up in, all you know, and you have to try to figure out a way to exist. And the root shock is, if you can, I'm sure there's some gardeners in here, if you just pull a plant out of the ground and try to replant it somewhere else without any type of care or nurturing, it's not likely to make it. The historic convening in 2024 allowed us to really connect with some organizations that were able to help us really document our story, concluding with the harm report, which was done in 2025. Many of the organizations that we work with, you are as well, the African American Redress Network, Howard University, who was instrumental in documenting the harm that was caused. And for one thing I would like to say is that many people have lived the experience, and I know in the case of Greenbelt, it might be slightly different in that Lakelanders had established a home and was told to leave, where in Greenbelt you just weren't allowed to reside in that area. But I believe it's similar in the harm that is caused, but also in how you work through those issues to come up with a solution. The way forward for us is, as was mentioned before, this is coming from the UN's documents on what are the 5 pillars of restitution for restorative justice. And as was said, it's not just about some type of monetary compensation, but restitution, in that what we're looking to do now is create a Lakeland Legacy member designation that would allow past Lakelanders and their descendants to acknowledge that their past was affected by the demise of Lakeland, and establish this Lakeland Council to start to give direction to the city on things that Lakelanders feel is important to restoring Lakeland and its history. One of those things that was discussed, we're talking about housing, is a right of first refusal on real estate. Because of our proximity to the University of Maryland, Lakeland is a prime rental area for student housing, and it, in many ways, engenders that same harm from years past. Not that we don't like our college students and welcome them as residents, but basically the way that they are redeveloping the houses and redesigning the property, that it somewhat eliminates the possibility for single-family buyers to even consider Lakeland as a primary resident. But we would like to return Lakeland ownership to a Lakeland home ownership program. And we have a small win that's going on right now. You've probably read about it in the paper, but in 2021, one of our houses blew off of its foundation because of the straight line winds that we had. That property sat vacant for, well, it's still vacant, but as an example, it went to an investor. It was actually owned by an investor, and it was a rental property at that time. It went to another investor that did not do diligence or develop on the property. We were fortunate that the city, through the Restorative Justice Commission, bought the property, and where it is currently now is we have a partnership with Habitat for Humanity and also the College Park Trust. So it's way over my pay grade, but the Habitat for Humanity is going to build a structure, and they are listening to Lakelanders in that we are asking that it be a duplex so that we can double our homeowner occupancy if possible. It will be affordable because the trust will own the land, and only the buildable portion of it will be sold. So that's a small win that through collaboration we're able to work on at present, and hope that this is something that will continue. Thank you. As for compensation, we are getting to the point where we're looking to try to develop some direct payments for those that were forced to leave from 1960 to 1981, because we're now able to start to do some research on what the sales price was for the property and what actually happened. Keep in mind that I said a lot of these properties were raised, but nothing was done to them for 10, 15 years. So not only was that lost wealth and home ownership for the family, but they were given pittance in compensation with the thought that they would have first right to come back to those homes, which never happened. Number two is we currently have a Lakeland Legacy Scholarship Program that we are allowing for the diaspora of Lakelanders and also current Lakelanders to reintroduce an educational component that we can start to create the opportunity for wealth through education. Looking and working with the University of Maryland to see if there's a possibility for free college tuition for descendants, and the free market restitution for demolition of homes. Those are things that we hope to acquire in compensation, and you can see that's not a check for someone that's trying to reimburse someone for losses that they haven't documented concerns that they have lost. Rehabilitation, I somewhat mentioned this before, is we would like cultural and institutional development. It's a pipe dream, but it's one that we are continuing to work on. The high school that I mentioned still exists and is at the end of the Lakeland community, and we would love to be able to reacquire that and turn it into a cultural center, not only for Lakeland, but for College Park in general. And one of the things in the rehabilitation that we're talking about now is that intergenerational healing initiatives. I mean, we are seeing trauma in folks who are grandchildren, great-grandchildren of people who actually went through this. Some of them they actually knew, some of them they didn't know, but the story is still real to them, and it's very present of mind, so we need to work through that. In the satisfaction goal is to try to memorialize Lakeland as best we possibly can. Again, the city has worked with us. There's a property that is not buildable as far as being able to build any type of structure on it. The city actually owns it, and we're looking to turn that into a green space that we could hopefully be a gathering space, but also a memorial for Lakeland. I mentioned the memorial of the Lakeland school site is something that we would really like to see happen. The visual representation of the resolution, we're looking to have that placed in the City Hall of College Park for all to see. And one thing that really started this whole initiative and keeps it alive is there is a Lakeland Digital Archives that is a partnership between the University of Maryland and the Lakeland Community Heritage Project, which is where it still is a repository for most of all of the study and information that we have on Lakeland Pass. And we want to make sure that it is secure information and available to all. What's next? Near term, as I mentioned, the formal legacy Lakeland Legacy membership is one that we're working on, memorialization in the city, adopting a first right of refusal policy for Lakeland urban renewal. In the near term, we're hoping to launch a Lakeland home ownership program to return diaspora back. And to restore visual and physical access to Lakeland. Just to give you an idea, there is now a barrier between Lakeland and what used to be the east portion of Lakeland. And we're hoping to at least be able to have visual access to that without any natural access. And that's also a prevalent harm for us now. Long term, hopefully 2030 and beyond, is to work on the fair market restitution for displaced families, the establishment of a permanent cultural and educational institute, and position Lakeland as a national model for urban reparations. We hope that what we are doing will be able to be replicated throughout the country. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And folks have other questions? Will be sticking around? They can.
Yes.
Okay, great. So lunch is ready. It's back here on the right-hand side. We're going to give folks 17 minutes. I have 1:48. So if everyone can be back in their seats where they're at by 2:05, then we can move on with the most important part, hearing your voices on the recommendations.
Hi everyone, my name is Sarina Scruzzi. It's such an honor to be here on such an important occasion. I just wanted to, because Emissary Green of the Piscataway Indian Nation is not here, I just wanted to make sure somebody gave a land acknowledgement, because it's an event that's occurring on land that was lived on, inhabited by, cared for by the people of the Piscataway Indian Nation for 15,000 years before it was settled by others, and both those who came here freely and those who were forced to come here. So I think it's also in the spirit of reparations to get used to acknowledging harm and also being comfortable with discomfort. So I'm quite uncomfortable because I don't know enough about the Piscataway Indian Nation, but I do know that we have to acknowledge Mother Earth and all of our relatives, animals and trees and all the living things that we share this land with, and where so much of our food and our shelter comes from. And we have to acknowledge our relations, all the people that we're related to here. All of us are related. And we have to acknowledge, I think, what else do we have to acknowledge? So if we're trying to actively change the future, we have to acknowledge that this is the traditional homeland of the Piscataway people, and I think that's good enough. Also that there is, Emissary Green is on the commission, I think, for the reparations. And I hope that listening to each other and working on this, we see each other as one people, not as separate groups trying to, help our own group, but really, we have so much more in common than we have in difference. So, and we share so much, and we only benefit when everyone is safe and healthy and happy, and can achieve their full potential. So, thank you for putting this together.
Thank you. One thing I think all us commissioners, or I'll say for myself personally, learned of the 7 generations principle, which speaks to me in thinking about the decisions that we make. How are we drawing upon the wisdom and the knowledge and experience of the 7 generations before us? It's an indigenous people's saying. And then as we make those decisions, how do we think about the 7 generations after us who will be affected by the decisions we make now? So that was a very learning experience for me, and I think it's important as we kind of have our discussions today.
Okay. Thank you, Mark, and thank you, Farinaz. I do want to say that today's town hall, we're focusing primarily on the recommendations and the harms from the African American community. There will be a separate town hall that will focus on the harms to the Native American community. Also, on the back of your agenda, in your folder, there is a timeline, and the first item on that timeline is to recognize that the Native American community was on this land before any of us existed. So at this time, we're going to give you an overview of our recommendations, really what we also want to do is acknowledge these harms. That's one of the first things, acknowledge the harms and acknowledge the effects that these harms have had on some of our residents today. And to meet this goal, we're going to focus on some of what the city can do in terms of acknowledgement, but also what we as a community can do to educate other people in the community and outside of the community. I want to thank Robert Thurston for his presentation, and one of the things I got out of it is that it was a number of years before from the journey from acknowledgement to accountability. This is going to be a long journey for us, and so we're just at the beginning part of that. So buckle up, it's going to be a long journey. But I think with patience, we're going to get there. As we interviewed residents of Greenbelt, there was one consistent message, and that everybody thought Greenbelt was great. Everybody loved being here. So I think we can achieve the equity that we seek and still keep this a beloved community. So a lot of our focus on the African American communities is regarding the wealth gap between African Americans. We want to address those inequities, and the research has shown that those inequities are primarily driven by housing and education. So we have a housing and an education group as well. There were a number of suggested remedies that came out of our last town hall and several public meetings that we had that we called good governance. So things the city can do to ensure that there's equitable services, etc. And so that's why we have the good governance group. So today we're going to present the 3 areas, as you can already see. And we're going to go into our small group discussion now. I think Mark is putting food in his mouth as I'm about to ask him to provide some instructions. Sorry, Mark.
Oh, it's all good. All right, yeah, so hopefully you're seated in the group that you want. If not, we'll give folks 2 minutes to kind of adjust to them. This is housing, education, housing, general governance, and education in the back. You have a facilitator in your group who has questions that are going to guide the discussion. But essentially, we just want to hear your feedback, and if there are alternative or other ideas you have in this particular area. You'll have a co-facilitator who's going to take notes on the chart. Someone also might be typing some of the notes just for posterity. We'll have about 30 to 35 minutes in your small group to look at the recommendations, give feedback on those recommendations, and then what we're going to have is something called a gallery walk, which means if you're in housing and you want to give feedback on governance, at the end, you're going to have about 15 minutes. You can see on the post-it note or in the flip charts that the governance section is done. You're going to read them and you're going to say, oh, I have an additional idea or additional thought on this. And there'll be post-it notes so that you can post your idea on that, even if you're in another group. And so you'll be able to kind of walk through the gallery for about 15 minutes and put your idea up on each group. A few important norms to return back to in the small groups. You want to hear from all voices, so I'll just be direct. If you, are giving your feedback for a couple of minutes, trying to think to yourself, let me make space for another voice after I've kind of been able to give my feedback. And if you're still sitting with, I have more feedback to give, I have this great story that I need to share, your facilitator will be there, and after kind of the group has a chance, make sure to go up to your facilitator and say, I have so much more information I didn't get a chance to share, and they'll take your name and we'll make sure that information needs to be shared. Again, embrace multiple perspectives. We don't want to get into debate, we want to hear the multiple perspectives and then take care of yourself. This can be emotional work, so if you need to take a second to take care of yourself, please do that. And we'll make sure to announce at the different times where we're going to shift from the small groups to the gallery walk and then back to everyone. Any questions before we kind of move into the group feedback?
Does everybody have the...
Yeah, and everyone should have in your green packet a list of the recommendations that Denise just showed us. So you have that available. And if you don't, raise your hand and myself or another one of our commission members will come around and we can bring you that. So any questions before I turn it over to your small group facilitators? All right, thank you all so much. All right. So, yes, please have a seat. And then I'll ask the facilitators of the group to, again, you don't have to be all-encompassing. No, you don't have to be all-encompassing as a facilitator, but just kind of try to highlight 3 to 5 big ideas, pieces of feedback, discussion questions that you heard within your group. And then, yeah, so it'll give us an opportunity to hear about the discussions in each group. So we're going to start over here with housing.
All right, so our group was the housing group, and I'm going to get a little bit closer so I can read the notes that we had. But for the most part, our recommendations or remedies are on page 1 and 2 of the packet that you had. And so some of the recommendations we heard was to make sure that we're tracked, who's going to keep the data. One of the first things that we said was that we wanted to make sure we had data, but who's going to keep it and who's going to track it was one of the comments that came up. There was also some discussion about the nonprofit entity that we mentioned. Given that there's already some nonprofit entities and organizations that are already doing homeownership counseling and doing a lot of the work around homeownership, how can we make sure we find out who they are and expand some of what they're doing already instead of trying to create something new? We also heard that one of the responsible entities that we called out in our recommendations, it said, City of Greenbelt, it also said GHI and others, but it included the federal government. But there were no recommendations that were really attached to the federal government. And so there was a comment around that as well. There was some commentary about pre and post-purchase counseling, making sure that we keep post-purchase counseling in there, because it's really important that once people have homes, that they also understand the maintaining of it. With the tiered program, we want to make sure that we also include rent to buy as an opportunity, so thinking about lease to own, and not just the buckets of renter or owner. We also might have missed unhoused. So how do we make sure that we're not just thinking about ownership, home ownership, rental, but also unhoused communities? And the last comment I'll just highlight is, someone mentioned that it's important for us to also think about the quality of life issues, so not just housing, but how do we make sure that there's some element of attaching to food support and other issues and other needs of residents of Greenbelt.
All right, thank you so much, Councilman. I feel like I'm Sally, Jesse, Raphael. That may be O'Donoghue.
Thank you. We're the education panel, and I'll start off with my better looking and more handsome colleague Bob will pick up after me. Several things, and I want to thank everybody for your contributions today. One thing that we did come up as that were over, the large shots was one thing that was the least common denominator is that one thing we have to be sure is that the solutions we have are targeted to African Americans who are harmed in the community. I'm sure they're going to talk about this in good governance over there with my good friend London, but that was one thing that we said, we make sure that they're targeted to African Americans so that we can have the most impact. One great idea, or a lot of great ideas, but one of them was free books to children and families from birth to kindergarten or through elementary school, similar to the program that Dolly Parton has. I think she has a free book program from birth to whatever to try to increase the literacy rates of black children. These are specifically targeted towards black children. Another was a campaign to hire more African American teachers in Greenbelt. Thank goodness we had a person here who teaches at Spring Hill Lake Elementary School who's able to give us kind of a number breakdown there. Another thing is to be sure to share information about programs. Sometimes there are and we have to become innovative with that, through social media, through spreading the word to other families, to African American families, so that you know that there is a preschool program, that there is an after school program, that there is tutoring, that there are these things that are targeted towards your children to help increase the academic rates of your the graduating rate, and all those things for your children. Another is, we want to help with regard to parent-teacher organizations, PTAs. One of the other great recommendations is, to have free child care and perhaps a stipend for parents to attend those meetings. It's very important so that the parents can become part of the PTO, the PTA, the whole equal cycle of elementary, secondary, and high school parent-teacher involvement. But the problem is sometimes you're working a job or two and you just can't take the time off to be there, or you don't have child care. If you do have the time to take to go to these events, you need to have child care. So that was something that was also proper, and provide transportation for children, for black children to be able to participate in some of these programs. If you live in, for example, Spring Hill Lake, show you how old I am, Franklin Park, and you want to go to something in Central Greenbelt, you may not have access to get there or transportation there. So we need to provide safe transportation for individual children to participate in that. And so with that, I hand it off to my better looking counterpart, Bob.
Well, I'll dispute the better looking. So a couple other things that came out was helping parents. A lot of discussion came back to the family, that a lot of education happens within the family before school and also during school. How do we support families? There was a really interesting conversation about what Movement had called the lost kids, the kids who are really having a hard time, and how to support them and to get them to be interested in their own education. Again, coming back to the family. And there was a really interesting side conversation kind of during the walk around with Councilmember Pope, who's actually a teacher, special ed teacher at Spring Hill Lake Elementary. I pointed out that the commission, as I'm sure many other people do, look at the assessment test scores of the different students, of the students at Spring Hill Lake compared to other schools. And it doesn't look great. But she's making the point that a lot of the families have 2 to 3 jobs. They have a really hard time. English is a second language. They may not speak English. So it's a real challenge for education to happen within the home as well as within the school. And she's making the important point that a lot of people point to Spring Hill Lake as a failing school when in fact they're doing really great things for the students and important work at the school.
Thank you all for the education group. I wish I could actually be like Oprah and say, look under your seat, you get a car, you get a car. I'm going to come over to this other.
You need Oprah's bank account.
Oh, yes, you need Oprah's bank account. Yeah.
Hello, everyone. Thank you again for coming today. My name is London McLeod. I'm a Reparations Commissioner. And before I get started, I thought I would share a little story. I hadn't had a chance to share with our group about the importance of transportation. One of the personally most touching stories we hear when we are working on reparations, we hear research, we receive emails on all sorts of topics. Of course, the topics here today, one being transportation. But one of the things that we have taken for granted in transportation is our seatbelts and our airbags. We found out that airbags are one of the most biased products produced. Dumb? Yes, someone said they saw it. Yes. So just so that you know, the dummies that are used and the whole entire airbag, inflation, seatbelts are only 5'8" and 135 pounds. That is the standard that the car industry, automobile industry uses in order to assess impact, in order to assess crashes, and of course in order to assess a total. That means that they are not taking into account the demographics that are taller, that are more curvier. They don't take into account earrings for women, because the industry is based on a specific research base. They don't mean any harm, they just simply don't know anything. And only through understanding diversity, understanding complexity, understanding that African Americans are more likely to wear glasses than non-African Americans, and what does that impact do to your face? These are all real things. I mean, so when we talk about reparations, when we talk about transportation, please understand that these issues are complicated and that they are multi-layered, and that is one of the things that we're looking at. Now today we are not assessing airbags, by the way. But I did want to set the stage for our conversation. So today we are actually working on good governance. We have 4 major issues. I will just quickly go through kind of some of the amazing, and thank you again for everyone in our group's feedback. We had actually on 1C, which is harm transportation, provide a direct route from Greenbelt East to the Metro Station. One of our feedbacks is that we need to provide more clarification. We need to provide more, whether that's walking, biking, or bus, adding more direct route for that. The second item we had was actually talking about the harm and lack of citywide information and distribution. If you look under here, we expanded the resources, which is probably the most important, which is including churches, schools, camps, and recreation areas. That's one of the things. One of the feedback which I appreciate was actually to the last page, which is on page 4 on the back, city acknowledgement, apology, and accountability. I definitely received feedback that believes that this is one of the most important things we can do for reparations. So I appreciate that as we move forward, having a better understanding of the importance of that for the community. And then finally, we have also, oh gosh, which one is this? One second. It's about in continuation with the back page, there was feedback that we are acknowledging and apologizing to the suggested remedies, which is actually which is the construction workers for African Americans, that we include current and future African American construction workers when we begin to acknowledge in that area. We also received great encouragement for more participation and feedback with the PG County Lynching Memorial Project, which we are involved in, so we would love to continue that as part of reparations. And then finally, we have the great idea of a managed city, correct me when I'm wrong, city managed garden, which is separate from the garden club, because the garden club is private, and the garden club property can be passed down from generation to generation. So this was also a wonderful addition to our recommendations. And I'm going to, we had one last one that kind of complements the education group. You guys talked about books for all children. We talked about, we have the recommendation of a bike for every child. So yes, yeah, that would be a good idea. So that's what we have so far, but thank you.
All right, thank you all. Before there's James. Before I turn it over to Denise and James for wrapping up, again, just returning to our desired outcomes, one, we wanted to introduce the history of Greenbelt and the complexity in that history. We heard from Lakeland, and we were able to view the work that they're doing. Hopefully that was informative. We were all able to hopefully eat some delicious cookies. Hopefully we met that objective. Or at least not, you found something that was yummy. We were able to hear voices in all the groups, so thank you so much for all that input. And please give yourself a round of applause. Honestly, for sticking it out 3.5 hours on a hot, muggy Saturday, that should definitely go acknowledged. Your input is super valued. And then lastly, if you didn't get your story to tell, you have another nugget of wisdom or information, our commissioners are going to stick around for a couple of minutes afterwards to, again, if you have a story to tell, you want to make sure it gets told, we'll do that. And then lastly, before I turn it over to Denise and James, if you're able, you probably know the term, many hands make light work. So if you're able to do two things for us, it would be huge helpful. If you're able to clean up whatever, and put in the trash, any trash that's around you, bring your stuff with you. And as you're able, again, totally optional, you're able to bring your chair with you full and just put it against the wall. It's going to help our library folks huge as they kind of work to clean up the room. So I'll turn it over to Denise and James.
Thank you all for coming today. Thank you for engaging. This conversation is not over. It's just getting started. I'm going to turn it over to James for the closing, but I do want to thank Bill Orleans for his attention to this work. I think he has probably attended just about every meeting. And now I'll turn it over to James for closing comments.
Thank you, Denise. And, I just want to thank you again. Again, I want to thank, they have to be my neighbors, but also my council members who are here. Please, thank you so much for attending today. Councilman McKinney and also Kirsten, thank you so much for being here. And, one thing I want to say that I'm sure that you all notice that, our recommendations have in common is that they're all forward-looking and they look to expand opportunity, not to limit it. And, our goal from the Reparations Commissions from our first day we met is not to divide Greenbelt. The goal is to make Greenbelt stronger. And, I'd like to leave you all with the final thought. And throughout American history, every generation has faced moments it had to decide whether to ignore injustice or confront it. And Greenbelt right now has that same opportunity. We can't change what happened in 1937. We can't change what happened in 1967. We can't undo exclusion. We can't erase those painful chapters from our history, but we can decide what kind of community we want to be in 2026 and beyond. And, you know, I'm going to mention him again. The guy was chief of staff to John Lewis. Mr. Lewis used to say that the vote is precious. It's almost sacred. You know, and he also taught us, I'm talking about us as Americans, something that's almost equally important. Democracy is not a spectator sport. You got to get in and you got to be involved. Because building a just community requires participation. It requires courage. It requires listening. That's what all of you are doing today. And that's what we're doing today. And I think most importantly, it requires hope. Sometimes when you don't have anything else, you got to have hope that things are going to be better. And if Greenbelt truly wants to live up to its founding vision as a model community, then we must be willing to tell the entire story, not just the chapters that celebrate our accomplishments, but also those that challenge us to do better. Because when we acknowledge our shared history, and that's what it is. This is all of our shared history. You know, Denise knows I was able to speak to the Eleanor Franklin Democratic Club, I don't know, maybe 2 weeks ago, and that was the one thing I said about reparations. Reparations, that's not just black history, that's history. That is American history. It's a history of people that continue to push on and persevere despite all the odds against us, and that should be an inspiration to everybody who calls America her home. Thank you. You know, I want to thank everybody here for your time, for your openness, for taking the time out of a Saturday afternoon to meet with all of us, because this is your contribution to what we're trying to make, to get things going forward. And you know, again, I'll end with a quote from John Lewis. He used to say all the time, you know, there are times when we have to get in necessary trouble. We have to get in good trouble. And this is necessary trouble. This is good trouble. As I said before 2 weeks ago, you don't have to march over the Edmund Pettus Bridge to get in necessary trouble or good trouble. Your participation here is what is the necessary trouble and the good trouble to move things forward. And we all look forward to hearing from your ideas after, you know, it's all said and done. And Bill, I'll see you at the next meeting of the Reparations Commission. Thank you so much. Oh, there is an upcoming Indigenous meeting in July. Please attend.
Come see me if you're interested.
There you go.
I'm running the Indigenous meeting in July. We are hoping to engage with the Piscataway Indigenous Nation, which is called PEN, and we are open to, we are open to feedback. We are going to do a lot more cultural sensitive, so we won't have a town hall. We will have something that is more native to the culture of the Indigenous people. And so it won't be necessarily a powwow, but it may be a healing circle. So even if you're interested in coming to learn something of a different culture and a different way of doing things and thinking and learning, I am learning every single day. Please join us. More info.
Thank you.
On the distribution list, correct?
Yes,
Okay,
we'll send it to the distribution list.
Also, I just want to remind everyone the recording for today's town hall will be posted on our website.
Tell them that you're working with them.